My name is Rajeev Bhargava, and I'm a professor at the Center for the Study of Developing Societies in Delhi. I was earlier with the Jawaharlal Nehru University, where I taught for 25 years. Pluralism is the idea that a complete view or conception of human flourishing cannot be held by one individual, one society, one group, one culture, even one civilization. So that if people really want to live a life of the fullest possible human flourishing, then they have to rely on many cultures, many civilizations, and many worldviews or religions. Yeah, in my view, that's what pluralism is. Now there are two kinds of pluralism. One was what we might call the idea that one individual self has the capacity to contain within herself many of these plural cultures and plural points of views and perspectives, so that it's not just groups but individuals themselves who can hold this plurality. And the other view is that there are many groups, and all these different groups can coexist and should coexist in the same society. So you can have a pluralist society, but you can also have a pluralist individual. And I think the distinction between the two is quite important. I think one is that from very early on, Indian traditions had this idea that gods of different regions, different cultures, can be translated into one another. So that a god in one part of India who is, say, the god of love, is the same as a god of love in some other part of the country. That makes movement and understanding between religions easy. But there's also the view that you have one God and there are many roots to the same God. And that also makes it easy for people to coexist with one another, because they can see that there is something which is common between or among them. The fact that these resources are present in Indian traditions makes it very easy for a lot of people to live together. The other thing is that people also believe in multiple allegiances. So they don't necessarily have the view that if in order to believe in one God, you have to reject all other gods. They can believe in one God and another God at the same time. So people can visit the same shrine, even though they are Hindus and Muslims, or they can follow the teachings of the same guru, despite the fact that they belong, to different religions, and all these ideas and resources which are present in ancient Indian traditions really help the survival and the growth of pluralism. But these are not the only facilitating factors for the growth of pluralism. The fact that there isn't a strong institutionalized and organized and bureaucratized social structure with enormous power, which is in a sense watching the boundaries of of various communities and making it difficult for people to cross over from one to another. And the fact that the state has never really aligned itself very strongly to one religion or legitimated political, or religion has not legitimated political violence or political rule and kept, both of them have kept distance from one another. All these factors are responsible for the flourishing of a pluralist society in India. To take concrete examples of the third point, which I made about the state keeping distance from all religions, I think one outstanding example is the Emperor Ashoka of the 3rd century before the Common Era. He left behind several edicts which have survived because they are on iron pillars or on rocks. And one of them says that people from different philosophical and religious communities must dwell everywhere in his kingdom, not back to back, but face to face. In other words, even if there is a tendency within groups to stick together with people of their own ilk and not to mix around with people who have different philosophies or religions, they should not live separately but should be living as mixed populations. And he also says that there is a common foundation for this living together, and that common foundation comes from the resources that are available to each of these religious and philosophical communities. And one of them is self-restraint. And in particular, he talks about restraint in speech. He argues that each of these philosophical and religious traditions have this idea of restraining yourself, even if you do not like some other, something in other philosophies or religions. So Ashoka points out in his edicts, he says that you can be critical of others, but be critical only if you have good reason to. And even if you have good reason to, your criticism should be there only on appropriate occasions. And even when the occasion is appropriate, you should do so moderately and never immoderately. But that's not the only thing he says. He also goes on to say that you would obviously like your own elements of your own philosophy and religion, but you should never praise yourself in the presence of others unless you have good reason to, unless there's an appropriate occasion. And even if you have the appropriate occasion and you have good reason to praise yourself, do so only moderately. Because if you because self-glorification is not only one way of demeaning others, but it's also, in a sense, demeaning yourself, and you shouldn't let that happen. And so he works out principles of coexistence among different religious and philosophical communities. And this pattern, which is found in the 3rd century BCE, this pattern is repeated in other periods as well. For example, in the 16th century, in the reign of Akbar, you find similar kind of perspectives and policies being put in place, where different faiths are interacting with one another. I mean, now you have Islam, you have Jesuits coming in, and Akbar has this policy of different religious communities having dialogue with one another, interacting with one another, learning from one another, and he has this conception that he would evolve a new religion which would contain elements from all these different religions. So once again, there is an attempt to break rigid boundaries, not to be dogmatic, not to be rigid, but to evolve, new ways of new moralities, new public and private moralities, which would be to some extent acceptable and endorsed by everybody in society. So ways of diminishing the divisive impacts of philosophies and religions, and of fostering mutual learning and evolving new ways of new moralities. This is again something that you find in the ancient period from time to time. And the state has always patronized not just one but many religions and philosophies. So all these historical factors have played a role in sustaining religious diversity and even religious pluralism, which is a normative standpoint that endorses the idea that there is something good about the existing plurality in society. Actually, there are 3 or 4 developments in the last 300 to 400 years. One is the introduction of an idea of religion that actually was born in 16th century Europe at the time of the conflicts that began to take place within Christianity after the breakdown of Latin Christendom. And this idea that religion is defined by a set of fixed doctrines which are held by a rigid and bounded community, which is demarcated from other doctrinal communities, and each of which are kind of, in a sense, locked in a battle to get the allegiance of individuals in society, and exclusive allegiance, so that if you get into one community, then it must be at the expense of other communities and by rejecting other communities and their viewpoints and perspectives. Now, this kind of an idea of a religion, which then came into India with colonial modernity, I mean, that's been a very major reason why there has been the birth of what we in India call communal conflicts. This sense of religion has been globalized. It's part of now everybody has come to accept it. And it was only in the 19th century that you began to think about Hinduism as a unified religion, side by side with and some competing with Islam as a unified religion, Christianity as a unified religion, and so on and so forth. Now, once you have this idea of religion come into the public domain, then it encourages the sense that there are monoliths, religious monoliths, that are locked in some kind of a rivalry and even battle with one another. So that's one. The second factor, I think, responsible, which causes a big challenge to religious diversity, is the transformation of faiths into political ideologies. I mean, you can either define your identity in a flexible manner, or you can define it in a rigid and dogmatic manner. And instead of religion being a soft identity shaper, religion becomes a hard identity marker. And the moment that transformation occurs, you once again have the potential for a lot of trouble. And when this gets aligned to nationalism of the ethnic variety, ethno-nationalisms, then you really get into all sorts of troubles in relation to who's going to have political power, how much, and how are the resources of a particular territory to be distributed. And I think that happened in India, and that's certainly one of the reasons why there's been such a problem. And then, of course, competition, democratic competition, electoral competition, the idea that you can mobilize people on grounds of religion, and then you can win, you can create a majority and win power, and you should do it at any cost. And if you do not have sufficient constitutional safeguards, then this can lead to all kinds of troubles, the making of a majoritarian society and the potential persecution of minorities and so on. So all these factors are responsible for undermining the older ancient ideas of religious pluralism and coexistence of religious communities in India. The Indian Constitution has been a remarkable document. It conceived a state which would be secular in the sense that it would keep distance from all religious communities, and also that it would address problems of both inter-religious domination as well as intra-religious domination. By inter-religious domination, I mean the domination by one religious community of other religious communities. And this is addressed by giving a set of rights to minorities in a limited domain, which will protect their anxieties about their identity and about their culture. But there are also issues of intra-religious domination, such as members of one community persecuting or marginalizing members of their own communities. So, for example, Dalits within the Hindus, the former untouchables, they were excluded from mainstream practices. They were not allowed to enter the temples, which were dominated by the upper castes. And the constitution banned untouchability. It opened up wells. I mean, the untouchables were not allowed to go to the wells from which water was drawn by the upper castes. This was before independence. And in the constitution, there were provisions by which all wells in all over India were open to everybody, regardless of their castes. Similar provisions are there for emancipation of women. Now, all these could not have been possible if the traditional elite within Hinduism or within Islam had state power. The upper caste elite or the clerics in Islam or in Hinduism, if they had state power, then it would be not possible to carry out this emancipatory agenda or to reduce problems of inter-religious domination. So the constitution set up a state which was not aligned to any religion or a section thereof, which kept distance from everybody, and which was able to, which provided certain basic rights to individuals as well as communities, and which took positive measures to remove the possibility of either of these two kinds of dominations. So the Constitution an Indian Constitution is a remarkable document which takes care of some of the challenges that I mentioned. But if if rule of law is not effective, and if constitutional provisions are not properly safeguarded, then all these important positive things which ought to be present in society can be seriously undermined, and sometimes that happens. I mean, there is a contestation going on all the time within India. It's not as if these things are solidly entrenched and permanently present. It's always very fragile, and so you see a kind of always a battle, both within castes as well as between religious communities, and from time to time, many of the things that undermine both intra-religious and inter-religious diversity, they get undermined in India, like they do in many other parts of the world, and so you need an alert citizenry. You need very honest and sound judges. You need from time to time politicians who are behave like statespersons. You need people with public conscience and a sense of public morality. You need a alert press, and unless all these are present, an effective state, a vibrant civil society, an active and alert citizenry, no matter how good the Constitution is, society will easily drift into something which is pretty far away from the values that the Constitution stands by and stands for. And I'm afraid that happens in India as well. I think the first thing to recognize is that a large and significant population of the world is still religious, which means that you cannot have a secularism which is anti-religious, which is suspicious of religion. You must have you must conceive a political secularism that has what I call critical respect for religion. Religion is a complex phenomena. It's internally very deeply differentiated. It's variegated, and there are lots of good things in it, but there are also lots of pretty nasty things in it. And the state must have, and by the state I mean a democratic state, which includes all the people. They must have the power of discrimination to identify those things which in religion which need to be combated, and those things which are deeply valuable and which need to be cherished. And this dialectical attitude to religion is extremely important. If we did not have the illusion of having a state which would try to eliminate religion or diminish the overall value of religion, I think secularism the world over would have been a far more acceptable ideology. But today it's very badly undermined because a lot of people have identified secularism with something which is anti-religious. Now, India has never done that, and I think that is one very major contribution that India can make to the debate on secularism and to a worldwide understanding of what the true kind of core point of secularism is. And the idea that religious and non-religious people can live together. I mean, that people who believe in different gods or different conceptions of the ultimate good can also live together. Even though India itself doesn't always live up to its own values and its own standards, the fact that this has been a long-standing idea in India and a long-standing value in India is again something that other countries can learn. The third thing is that all societies are marked by diversity, and religious diversity, and these religious diversities are of two kinds. One is horizontal, by which I mean that there are in every society has different religious communities, and in India, for example, we have not only Hindus but also Muslims and Christians and Sikhs and Buddhists and Jains and Parsis, and so there is this horizontal diversity, but there's also a different kind of diversity, which we might call internal diversity, diversity within religions, which there are two kind of ways in which this diversity emerges. One is when the core beliefs and practices of a religion are interpreted differently by different people of the same religion. So you have Shias and Sunnis, you have Protestants and Catholics, and you have the Vaishnavites and the Shaivites, and so on. But there are also another kind of diversity which could be called vertical diversity, where a lot of people are excluded from the mainstream practices of a particular religion, either because they are considered to be inferior, women, or outcasts in India, and so on. And they develop their own practices, and they develop their own thinking over a period of time that remains invisible and remains marginalized. So all these different kinds of diversities are there, and wherever there is diversity, there is the possibility of domination, of exclusion, of marginalization, of humiliation, and so on. And the state must not address only one kind of diversity or domination, but all kinds of diversities and all forms of domination. And I think one of the things which I mentioned earlier that the Indian secular state tries to do and must do, even if it fails to do it sometimes, is not only to address intra-religious domination, but also inter-religious domination. Both are important. And I think that's another lesson that can be learned, because in a large number of societies, diversity of religions is not accepted. And in those very societies where you have one religion which is dominant, those societies also do not respect diversity within their religion. So you'd always find if there is Shia dominance, then it's not just Islamic dominance, but also the persecution of Sunnis and vice versa. If there's an Islamic state, it just becomes a Sunni state, and even those Muslims who are not Sunni, they are persecuted in those societies. So whenever you have a religiously dominant, a society which gives dominance to one particular religion, in those societies you invariably find the dominance of a particular sect of that religion and the persecution of all the other internal minorities. And I think the Indian Constitution or the aspiration in India is to address all these different forms of domination. And I think that is again something that can be very useful. Of course, one can always learn all the negative. There are also negative lessons. I mean, but that India shares with a lot of other countries, and there's nothing uniquely Indian about it. I mean, the fact that there are, virulent forms of ethnic nationalisms or religious nationalisms, the fact that our democracies allow for the mobilization along religious lines, which use all kinds of unjust means to gain power. All these are things that should be avoided, not only in India, but in other parts of the world as well. And India can provide useful lessons on what should not be done, as much as lessons on what should be done.